Welcome back to Kai Havertz scores again. I'm recording this before the Porto game. So dependent on that result, we're either going to win the Premier League, Champions League, Tour de France, Olympic gold and Crufts, or we are the worst team in the world and Mikel needs the sack. But whatever's happened, Arsenal are top of the Premier League. As Mikel says, I didn't swear, YouTube. Fucking go, guys. With 10 games to go, the Premier League title is in our hands, and I'm absolutely terrified, but that's for another video. And Arsenal are playing some of the best football in their modern era. Don't tell me I didn't warn you. So I wanted to answer the question, what has actually got us here? Well, everyone and their nan can tell you that, at least in part, it's down to a particularly impressive season for Arsenal's defence. Arsenal's fans have been watching this coming for years now. We've known how good Saliba and Gabriel are, for example, since probably 2022. But now the wider public appears to have woken up to just how good we are defensively as well. And I want to get it on the conversation, but I want to talk about it from a slightly different angle. Usually in this type of why Arsenal's defence is good analysis, even on Sky and TNT and from mainstream analysts, you get bombarded with stats. Arsenal have the best XG numbers in the league, clean sheet numbers, Arsenal's defenders win a lot of duels, and so on and so on. I want to be clear, there's nothing wrong with that, and that has its place. Stats are important, they're interesting, and they can tell us a lot. But the more interesting part to me, and in my view the role of the analyst, especially for mainstream outlets, should be to present how they think those stats are being achieved. How, for example, did Arsenal get to a position where they'd conceded 2 shots over 0.1 XG in 2024 before the Brentford game? 2. Stats like that don't just come because Mikel got the recruitment right or because Saliba is big strong boy. In December, I did a video explaining to the best of my ability what I viewed as Arsenal's in-possession game model, and today I'd like to follow my promise in that video and try and do my best to explain what I think our out-of-possession strategy looks like. The strategy that's producing all of those incredible stats. You can find a link to that video in the description. It's worth saying, part of what makes Arsenal so good is that our in-possession work is part of our defensive strategy. In fact, maybe it's not good analysis to look at it in isolation in the way that I've done, as one feeds into the other. Looking at our passing networks in some of our recent games, holding on to it in these areas is doing a lot of the defensive work for us, and there is certainly a whole game approach angle to this. But regardless, here is part 2 of Arsenal's game model, as I see it, out of possession. I won't be able to cover everything, he says, covering his back, but here goes. First, the 2 basic ideas. I say basic, doesn't mean they're not effective, nor does it mean they're easy to accomplish in the best league in the world. First, the question of where on the pitch you want to be when you're out of possession from game to game. I love this quote from Mikel about being specific about what areas of the pitch you want to dominate, which will vary from game to game. There's times, of course, where you want a high defensive line and want to press up man for man, for example, Brighton at home to disrupt their build-up, but there must also be times where you trust your block if that's what the game calls for. For example, United at home to neutralise their transition threat. And that adaptability of how we defend is one of Arsenal's basic principles, I would suggest. Some games were higher, some games were deeper, it depends. We do try and defend high up the pitch quite a lot, but some games we are deeper. It just depends. And the other basic principle is the duels. Very simple, don't win your individual battles, none of this matters. That comes from being prepared mentally, obviously, but it also comes from being prepared physically. And I don't just mean in the gym. Remaining on the front foot with a low center of gravity, staying upright when appropriate, body orientated correctly before engaging in the duel, that can bring you a competitive advantage. How do you arrive into the battle? Gabriel is brilliant to watch for this, and many Arsenal players have spoken about this in the past in reference to Mikel's coaching. So we want to have the ability to defend in all areas of the pitch, and we want to do it well, but how do we do it in each area? If we're defending higher on the pitch, here's what I think. First, the aim, I think, is to either win the ball back high or force teams to go long for Raya to sweep or Gabriel and Saliba to collect. That's achieved often through a high press, so let's look at some examples in practice. Ødegaard is normally key, and he is here. There's a rough man-for-man press here as Liverpool look to play out in the early stages. The trigger for Arsenal to step up is as the ball goes across to Van Dijk and Ødegaard steps onto him. As you can see, all of his passing options are off as they're all covered, with Rice and Jorginho stepping in as the shadow covers to stop the entry pass as Saka steps onto Gomez. Arsenal move up as a team and time it well so the press isn't broken. Van Dijk is forced long, Arsenal win it back. A standard Arsenal high press. We do this so much, as you probably know, but the variety of our structure is what goes unnoticed, and that's what I want to focus on. From a restart here against Forest, who are building with a kind of 2-1, this time it's Jesus and Ødegaard stepping on as a 2 to disrupt that, with Smith Rowe in a pocket behind to stop the 1. and the others deeper and more narrow. Forest had no options, they're forced back, we win the ball. Villa away, we were more of a 3 at times, with the 2 holders a little higher to deal with their specific build-up shape, again, ridding them of options and forcing them long or into errors. Newcastle at home, we had 4 Arsenal players almost in their box at times to stop that pass into Bruno and Longstaff. However, there are times when we're a little less kamikaze with how high that press is, while still being variable. Against Man City, for example, who are so good at playing through you, we're defending high, but being a little bit more conservative, as they can bait you so well with their technical quality. We're a narrow 3 this time, with Martinelli inside, incredibly narrow on Rico Lewis, especially in the second half. Still works though, forces them back, and we get it back. The point is the adaptability. How many different ways we can press you, which must be worked on during the week dependent on the opposition, and also can change from moment to moment within the game, which is why I don't say Arsenal press like this. We press many different ways. Of course, there are times when we get the press wrong, but, and I'm not doing numbers today, if you look at the regain numbers, you can see how good we are compared to other teams in the league. And part of the variety in that press is the angle at which we do it. Against City, time and time again, I think we were trying to get Edison to pass to Ake, possibly their weakest passer in such an impressive back line, whose only option was often Guardiola, not a natural left back, so we could benefit. Our forwards do this by curving and placing their runs. Here, Jesus steps in, inviting Edison to pass to Ake. Here, Nketiah steps onto Edison, curving the run to provoke him to pass to Ake, and again, a few minutes later, all in the opening 8 minutes. We did it against Karius, forcing him to open out his body, which he doesn't love, and pass to Newcastle's weaker centre-back, Cher. Not that either of them touched it very much. City actually tried to do this to Raya, I think, to force him onto his weaker side, his left. Not necessarily to target a defender, I don't think, though I could be wrong. Finally, when defending high, we do well in our counter press when we lose the ball high up the pitch and quickly attempt to win it back, but I covered that more extensively in this video. Then we come to when we're defending in more of a mid-block or further back on the pitch, which happens more against really, really good teams. I would say we are almost always in a 4-4-2 when we're in the mid-block. As explained by Arsene Wenger in this brilliant video, it makes the most sense, but the height and character of it changes dependent on the other team's structure. For example, against Liverpool, Jorginho might sit a bit higher in McAllister at times, or against Chelsea, we're a little flatter at times, but the general shape of the 4-4-2 is usually there when we're defending in these zones in settled possession. The general idea, I think, is at all times to stop central progression, which we achieve a number of ways and through a lot of hard work. As you can see here, with Jorginho out of position, Saka actually collapses into Gomez, leaving his own man before going back out as Jorginho recovers. So the central blocking is always primary. We then, I think, try and force teams into actions. If the wide player is found, the team often swarm around them with varying degrees of intensity depending on situation, normally with the fullback stepping forward and the inside players not jumping, but blocking the inside pass to force him back, frustrate teams and get them to go long. Here, that happens around Diaz before he's forced back to Alisson. Another example, the ball goes out to Salah in the away game. Martinelli blocks it inside with Zinchenko stepping on. Salah has nowhere to go and we win the ball. And here's another example against City on the left side. Zinchenko stepping forward onto Walker with Rice and Nketiah blocking the inside passes, so they're forced back. As with all these things, doesn't always work. Saka gets sucked in here before being bypassed and then exchanging words with Declan as the structure is broken. But usually, it's been working for Arsenal. If teams do try and break lines, you often get Gabriel and Saliba stepping forward and winning the duels 9 times out of 10, as we see so often with them winning it back for us. This settled mid-block, by which I mean when the game isn't back and forth, is all about blocking passing lanes, which comes from the micro movements of our players blocking the lanes. That's a bit of a word salad, but I'd encourage you to go and watch these games back if you're a nerd like me on arsenal.com so you can see better than just in screenshots what I'm about to say. The team is constantly active, trying to stop that central progression, and crucially they move as one, almost as a kind of cascade of connected movements when appropriate. It's really impressive to people like me, and the best example is against City. Balls with Kovacic, and Arsenal are narrow. Ødegaard steps onto him, and Nketiah follows as the cover shadow with a connected movement, while Bernardo receives it. Bernardo gets forced back. Ball back with Ake, and you can see all of his lanes are blocked as Arsenal defend those channels. Rice cuts off that ball inside to Rico, and Ake is forced back again to Diaz, who finds Kovacic, and City go again. Jorginho, remaining active, blocks the lane. Foden receives, with Ødegaard blocking the pass inside, and Nketiah, Rice and White show those connected movements again, and adjust as that net to push City back. Ball goes back to Ake. Out to Diaz, Nketiah and Trossard move as one to block those balls into Alvarez and Rico as the team shifts over. Rico, he's not my friend. Diaz has a moment on the ball, and Zinchenko's micro movement here dissuades him from that pass out wide. Ball goes to Kovacic, he tries a long ball, we get it back. Me just commentating over a game of screenshots isn't that riveting, so I'll stop there. But the point is this. The team's concentration is incredible, and the connection is palpable. Those tiny 5 3-yard steps, the response to one another's movements. When Ødegaard changes his stride pattern, how does Rice slow down, etc, etc. That's what's impressive, and the best way is to go and watch it. Then finally, we have Arsenal defending deep. This is massively dependent on compactness, Raya's cross-claiming, which has helped us a lot. And I'd also like to highlight the complementary pairings we have in the likes of Jorginho and Rice, both second ball hoovers, which works with Saliba and Gabriel as the dual kings. Teams rarely get us camped on the edge of our box defending for our lives, but it happens. So what happens when it does happen? Compactness, winning your duels and holding the line are key principles for any team. But for Arsenal here, I want to highlight the roles of Saka and Martinelli. Their defensive numbers, I'm not doing them, are brilliant, but what their work rate allows us to do is pull White or Kivior or whoever it is inside into more central areas when we're defending deep and use our wide players' legs to pressure teams back and not get overloaded, nor knacker out our fullbacks. That relies on plain old running, tracking their men back, not actually acting like the superstars that they are. Saliba gets caught upfield and Saka is unselfish enough to do the outer possession work and get back for him. Here against Porto, both Saka and Martinelli in the box just moments after an attack means that Arsenal's most dominant defenders can occupy the most dangerous areas. There is always going to be space when you defend. Defend high, there's space behind. Defend deep, there's space in front of you. Defend wide, there's space in the middle. So the question is, where do you want that space? And for Arsenal, I find that we generally don't mind leaving the wide areas because we trust our cross-claiming and our defence of the 6-yard box. Arsenal rarely defend deep, but when they do so with calmness and grit. So there you go. My probably very flawed attempt at explaining Arsenal's out-of-possession structure. I'd love to know your thoughts and to stop this video being half an hour to see what I've missed. It goes without saying, these things don't just happen. You don't get a coordinated press with cover shadows responding to movements of forward players, midfielders stepping across, varieties of pressing structures and so on without a lot of time on the training ground. We also, of course, have individual talent coming out of our ears, and no system holds itself up in the way ours does without it. I'd like to remind people, as always, that what we've achieved defensively in the first 3 quarters of the season has been done without, to some degree or another, Timber, Tomiyasu, Partey and Zinchenko, and without Cedric for the most part. But ultimate credit has to go to Mikel and his coaching staff. Because right now, through this work, though it may not be as fun as scoring goals, it might be the thing that goes on and wins us the Premier League. Or if we lost against Porto, gets him sacked. One of the two. If you like The Different Knock, you can support us on Patreon monthly, or you can buy us a coffee.